classes. This is Mrs. Vandriat. I decided to record audio for this PowerPoint just because it gives you a little bit more of a teaching aspect than you just going through it on your own and trying to read it. However, if that's what you choose to do, if you'd rather just go through it on your own and read it and not listen to my audio, totally fine. But I will say, as we're going through this, I explain a little bit more in depthly than I just wrote on the PowerPoint. So, so let's go through this. It shouldn't take longer than 10 minutes for sure for us to go through this. The first thing I want to say is that the first few pages for sure of this presentation are going to be review. Hopefully you saw Diction Lesson and maybe you're like, we already know what diction is. Why are we learning this? But there's a few things I want to remind you about before we move forward and a few new things I'm going to add. Diction is one of those things that can really help you on the rhetorical analysis, so I want to make sure we are really solid with it as we move forward. So hopefully some of this is just review and it's just pulling it back out of your brain, but some of it at the end should also be new. So, first thing is diction means the writer's choice of words. Simple. Hopefully you remember that. But that's really all diction is, the words that the author chooses to use in their passage. So that means you should never, ever, ever say, the author uses diction. Because of course they do. They're using words, right? I saw more of that in the beginning of the year. I haven't seen so much of that recently. But this PowerPoint will help you not say that and to say more than that, right? So for example, you have to use an adjective when talking about diction. So they use patriotic diction or emotional diction or formal or conversational or didactic teaching diction are just a few options you could go with. We are going to give you more options in the later presentation that will help you have more options for. I'm so bad at this audio thing and it makes me crazy, but we're going to keep going through because I'm not going to redo this. Okay, so anyways, you need to use an adjective. You can't just say they use diction. So we'll go through some other examples of adjectives you could use. The second thing that I want is this thing called denotation versus connotation. Do you remember, hopefully, that we talked about this during Gatsby within those study guides, right? What is the connotative meaning of this word? And so just a quick reminder that denotation is a dictionary definition. The D's go together, so that's how you can remember. And it's what the word actually means. In the dictionary, if you looked it up, what's the definition? Whereas connotation, which we like to use a lot when it comes to diction, is the feelings, the emotions, the implied meanings that come with a specific word, okay? I like to use this little graphic up here because I think it kind of helps explain it. Ironically, I don't love this first example though. That doesn't make sense to me. I don't think about negative, positive, thin that way. And so that is a good thing to show you though, is that connotation can really be up to the reader and the audience. And so you can make your own deductions about what this word's connotation is to you, as long as you can back it up, right? For example, if I say ocean, maybe some of us love the ocean, so that's going to be a positive connotation. Maybe some of us hate the ocean and it's scary, and so that's going to be a negative. So it's all personal. However, I feel like these two bottom ones are good examples of why authors choose different words for to try and get this different tone and feeling across. And so we have unusual, right? That's kind of a middle of the ground word. If you want it to be more negative, you'd say something's bizarre. If you wanted it to be more positive, maybe you'd say something's extraordinary, right? That does sound more positive. Same with the word forceful. Domineering is this negative connotation. Assertive is if someone's assertive, like, good for you, you're assertive. And so just really thinking about how you use words and how the author is using words to get these feelings across. An example I had, right, is when I say coronavirus, obviously the denotation would be a more dictionary definition of what the virus is. And I'm sure we have plenty of connotation, kind of plenty of feelings when I bring up that word at this point. I kind of already said this, but right, these words are helpful when it comes to diction because it helps us think deeper, right? Why does the author use this word? What connotation comes with this word? Why did he use this one instead of this one? And so it helps us just take that next step of thinking. Okay, so then the rest of these slides are going to give you a few other things in your toolbox you could describe diction as. So all of these words, just forewarning, plus connotation, denotation, and diction will be on Friday's quiz. It's just a simple matching quiz. And so if, like I said, if you want to take notes and make sure you got these down and write them down, or if you'd rather just go through this slide and kind of remember them, that's up to you and your learning style also. Okay, so let's go through. Okay, so we have euphonious and cacophonous. I put the pronunciation down here of cacophonous because I mispronounce it every time. And so that's how you pronounce it. Euphonious is really just pleasant sounding diction. Okay, a word like pillow, right, rolls off the tongue, or ocean rolls off the tongue. Cacophonous are harsh sounding words. Vomit, right, like vomit, or crash. Cacophonous might be a lot of onomatopoeia words. We talked about that during Gatsby, right? Words that sound like the words they're describing. So crash or smash or bang. And so those are two ways that you can describe diction. Here's a nice little chart that you can look at. It gives you some vowel sounds. That's not always true, but I'll also give you an example, right? When I read this, through the drizzling rain on the steamy street breaks the morning sun. It sounds very poetic and flowing, whereas their loud songs bang great nerves of the wretched listeners. It doesn't flow. It has the word wretched in it, or even great. Maggot is a very kind of wretched word. And then over here we have better sounding words. So euphonious and cacophonous are two ways to characterize diction. The next one we have, this should be a little bit of a review, is literal versus figurative language. Literal language, right, is very straightforward. It's accurate language. They're not trying to embellish or exaggerate anything. He ran fast. Good, he's running fast. Whereas maybe you're reading a passage that has more figurative language. He ran like the wind. It includes more metaphors and similes and idioms to make it sound maybe a little bit more poetic as well. I think about the Kennedy passage you guys read last week. That's probably a lot more literal. He uses a lot of facts and statistics. Whereas like if you read any of Martin Luther King Jr.'s speeches, usually, right, like I Have a Dream speech, he uses a ton of metaphors and similes and imagery to get his point across. So just different types of diction as well that you can use. Another one is slang versus jargon, okay? And I said at the bottom, make sure you note the difference between these two because they seem kind of similar, but they're pretty different. So slang, the definition of that is informal and typically restricted to a particular context or group of people. So that's talking about language, obviously. You could have so many different type of contexts that have slang. So a few I put as examples, right, are teenager slang. You guys know that the GOAT means the greatest of all time, but would someone who's not a teenager know that, right? It's kind of within your context. So notice, are they using slang like that in their writing? Maybe yes, maybe no. Another example I put is American slang. So maybe someone from America that's not from America wouldn't know that hot means attractive, YOLO, a creeper, that one's kind of funny, or a chicken means to be a coward, or my bad means my mistake, right? And so those are just some examples, right? If you play a sport is kind of a really good example, or music, you will have slang that kind of only you know too, right? And so, for example, in softball, to eat it means like, don't throw it, just hold the ball, right? Stuff like that, okay? Another example, the next example is jargon, okay? So this might seem similar, but it's pretty different. So it's the use of specific phrases and words in a particular situation profession, or trade. And so usually slang ends up being more informal. Jargon usually ends up being more formal, okay? And so depending on, again, on the situation or context, this is a doctor talking to a patient, and he's using all of this jargon, all of this very educated language, and so he obviously doesn't know what he's talking about. And so that's an example. Another example I put up here is some of this political jargon that maybe you don't know if you're not a politician. A lot of these look pretty easy. But yeah, again, back to that Kennedy passage you guys read last week, a ton of kind of economic jargon in there, right? He was pretty specific about what he was talking about. So you could say the diction has a lot of slang or has a lot of jargon. It's a great way to analyze diction. Formal versus informal, we've used this quite a bit. This is pretty straightforward. Formal diction is very educated, dignified, elevated use of language. Informal or conversational diction isn't necessarily a bad thing. I want to push that forward. It just means they're choosing to use that for their audience for some reason. Figure out what it is, right? It's more the language of everyday use. It involves slang or simple or common words. And so here's an example, right? We have, even this word is slang, right? You're hot. And so him hitting on this girl, dang girl, you're hot, versus this more Shakespearean, formal, educated way to hit on her. And then just a few other examples right here. Informal is get out, get up, stuff like that. Formal is escape, rise, begin. So you can look through that. So just some of my final hints for success. I guess I did go a little bit over 10 minutes. Sorry for that. Is just to remember this one. You guys have gotten a lot better with this too. It's not sufficient, we're past that now, to simply say the author uses, whoa, did I mess this up? Oh, yes, no, okay. Stick with me, I know what I'm saying. Okay, so you can't say they just use formal or emotional diction. Those are good ways to describe diction, but you have to also include examples of this type of diction from the text, okay? And so we'll work with that this week. But give them more. Don't just say, yep, formal diction, and then the person grading your essay is like, hey, they didn't even prove that to me. Give us some examples, okay? And then the next bullet point says, now we're past. You just did a whole lesson on diction. We're past terms like positive or negative diction. That's very broad. Dig deeper, push yourself. Lastly, as you're reading these passages that we're going to be writing essays on, this is kind of how you think about diction. I would just, as you're going through, start circling words that kind of stand out to you. And then when you go back, you can see, okay, all of these words are used and they kind of can be described as formal or as emotional or as patriotic, or look at all this slang, look at all this jargon. And so now you already have this evidence from up here and your adjective to describe the diction. So it gets you on the right track. Okay, like I said, sorry you went a little over 10 minutes, but hopefully the audio helped a little bit. If it didn't, let me know, and we will work through it together. All right, missing all of you. Goodbye.